As I Learn, We All Learn podcast coming 2022. So stay tuned, family.
ETM Hotel, Rennie Sean, welcome in peace. My name is Sean. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into the Monster Warrior Clan YouTube channel. Please like the show, share the show, tell a friend, We are live and in the building. We're about to get into a good, informative presentation. The good, the bad, the ugly, and indifferent. We're about to expound on some good information, man. So I hope everybody, you got your pen and your piece of papers out and you ready to write down your sources and get into this nice stuff. But before we do all of that, man, I really need everybody to smash the like button, share the show, and tell a friend that we're live, because we're about to get this information. And as you come in, please vote on the poll. Please vote on the poll.
Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play.
In Africa, I had a reason to be born there. So we have a God. We have our gods, and we have our mode of worship.
Queens, nod your head if you know you got soul. Women, snap your fingers, let your hair wrap go. Come on. Kings, got us feeling like we ain't trapped brown. All my brothers, put your hand on your chest now.
Freedom's what we need, more solutions is the key. Wave the banner of the free, that's the red, black, and green. Bringing truth to the streets, water get no enemy. If it's peace, we at ease. If it's war, we don't cease. EYE's on the crackers and police. Never slack up even when we free, cause we ain't free until we get the land, that's the green. Black power, new African, liberated from the thieves. Nothing better else to be.
Queens, nod your head if you know you got soul. Women, snap your fingers, let your hair wrap go. Come on. Kings, got us feeling like we ain't trapped brown. All my brothers, put your hand on your chest now.
Stimulated cause I'm liberated. Rock me African medallion in the middle of the clan. Situation freedom come drum playing by the river. I deliver for my people. It's the sequel of revenge. My friends get ready. Every knee shall bow. Every tongue shall tell. On the mountain I reveal. Throw the shells. 4 lights side up. Dark one up in my cup. Pour it out and then I strut. Alafia dear.
Queens, nod your head if you know you got soul. Women, snap your fingers, let your hair wrap roll. Come on. Kings, got us feeling like we ain't trapped brown. All my brothers, put your hand on your chest now.
When the African doesn't want to understand or participate in the reason why he was born,
Queens, nod your head if you know you got soul. Women, snap your fingers, let your hair wrap roll. Come on. Kings, got us feeling like we ain't trapped brown. All my brothers, put your hand on your chest now.
see, Africa has not been able to contribute its own knowledge to this universe. But we have knowledge in Africa. You understand?
Yeah, of course.
You see, so all these things need to be in the education system of the African countries.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully y'all are ready to ride this wave. I had to get rid of the Russian bot. Let me get my screen share. All right, let me check and make sure that y'all can see this on in them U-Tizzle streets. All right, again, man, we're about to talk about the first millionaire in Tennessee. His name is Robert Reed Church Sr. There's a junior that comes behind him, which is also a significant person in history because of what his father did. He laid a foundation for a junior to take over. I believe that his story provides a lesson worth learning, and it gives us a little bit more insight into what we could do as a people to kind of really take the lessons of history and apply them to our everyday life presently. As you can see, this presentation is sponsored by the Negro Truth Edition. You can catch that series on the Kofi Pie Side Research Team channel. You never know when I'm going to pop up with some Negro truth for that ass. All right. Excuse me, kids. I know y'all be tuned in and tapping in too, so my apologies for using the butt word. But please, man, again, like the show, share the show. And I know some of you guys have been waiting, not so long, but a little bit. And here we go. So here's my outline today. You'll get my introduction, research questions, my hypothesis, the argument, of course, and the conclusion. And my sources are in the description of the video. However, I do have them at the end of the presentation as well. Also, for everyone that is tuned in to the actual live stream, I actually dropped a PDF link of a free download of a book, Let's Put Our Money Together. And that is an instrumental book because there's it talks about the Freedmen's Bank and so forth. And one day I want to continue to have a discussion about that because I want to compare that book and the emphasis on the Freedmen's Bank, along with some additional information that I learned out of the Negro as a capitalist, which catapulted all of those things. And we could take a deeper dive into the Freedmen's Bank and its rise and its fall as well. All right. So history as it is written and spoke of is often romanticized by the presenter, who often omits the struggles of one's past. In the case of Memphis's first millionaire, his story is one worth observing. Today, we will walk down memory lane and observe the life of Mr. Church, the good, bad, and indifferent. I became interested in his failures and successes because I appreciate the teaching moments, and hopefully you do as well. For those of you that are asking me about what link, I said it earlier, the link to a free PDF download is in the description of the video, along with all of my sources. So here's our research questions. Who was Robert R. Church? Why is he known as Memphis's first millionaire? Really, Tennessee. How did he become Memphis's savior? What led him to owning a bank? How is he remembered in Memphis presently? These are some critical questions that we'll seek to answer in this presentation. So hopefully it's enough for you along for the journey and the ride, and many of you who may come in later on or catch the replay. I am of the belief that Robert R. Church just so happened to be the luckiest man at the right time in history. It's my belief. Something drastically had to happen in order for him to line his stars the way that he did. As far as him being a savior, I really can't see his success being as greater as any other. However, it led to him owning a bank and seemingly being revered by Memphisonians. Yeah, I made that word up a little bit. So who is Robert Church Sr.? Remember, there's a junior. We're talking about senior. Robert Church was an African-American entrepreneur and a landowner who lived most of his adult life in Memphis. Robert Reed Church, which is his name, was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi in 1839. He's the son of Charles B. Church and Emmeline, which is his mother, who was a slave, who worked as a seamstress on a plantation. In later years, Robert maintained that neither he nor his mother had never been treated as a slave, even though that was their legal status. His father may have treated him with affection, but he never formally recognized the relationship with his son. His father, again, Charles B. Church, was a white steamboat owner captain. His father was a white man. His mother, Emmeline, was a mixed race slave owned by his father. She died when Robert was 12 years old. Robert's father did a train with him in the steamboat business, where he was able to work as a dishwasher, cook, and a steward, which was the highest position that a black could then achieve. In 1862, Church was working as a steward on the steamer Victoria when it was captured by the Union troops during the Civil War. The Union left the 23-year-old Church stranded in Memphis. During his time in Memphis, Church began to establish himself as a successful businessman. At various times, he owned a saloon, a hotel, bank, restaurant, park, auditorium, along with various real estate investments, and we'll dive a little bit deeper later on. He was on his way to becoming a millionaire. The Memphis race riot of 1866 led to a white mob attacking Church's saloon, shooting him and leaving him for dead. He recovered, but was determined to stay in Memphis. He later testified against police during the investigation of the riots. For the rest of his life, he faced trouble with the police and with the underworld elements who frequented his establishment. In 1878, Church was shot by a local sheriff, supposedly in a fight over a black woman. That's what he got shot for, supposedly. In 1903, he was in a brawl with two white men and ended in jail. So for most people who, may have thought because of his fair skin, because he is of a mixed race, with his father being a white man and his mother being a fair-skinned black woman or a mixed woman, that he would get some type of favoritism. He faced the same discrimination as other people. When the yellow fever epidemic of 1878 hit, Robert Church stayed in the city. As Memphis was depopulated by the epidemic, the land was devalued, and Church saw a great opportunity in real estate. He invested cheaply and increased his property holdings throughout the city. His properties grew to include undeveloped land, commercial buildings, residential housing, and bars in the red light district of Beale Street. It's been said that he collected approximately $6,000 a month in rent from his properties. So that's a little summary about Robert Church Sr.'s
life. Now we're going to get involved in a little bit of his interest in Solvent Savings Bank and Trust, which is the bank that he owned, and it was also located in Memphis. And we will take a deeper dive into, we'll come back to a lot of his businesses that he owned, and we'll take a look at some things. While the Negro hope of creating an independent Black economy dates back to pre-Civil War days, the differential disadvantages suffered by the Negro masses as compared with the whites since the Depression of 1929 have caused the ideal to gain renewed popularity. The first dealers in money and credit were individual money lenders who were regularly engaged in other pursuits as the chief sources of income. Surpluses accumulated from these sources were lent at interest. So this expansion grew out of the conditions that resulted from emancipation. Since the freed Negro could no longer look to his master for support during illness or burial at death, these agencies were developed on a self-help basis to provide economic security. Then again, it was evident at the close of the war that the former slaves were not to be accepted as the social equals of white men and were therefore not to be assimilated into the social life of the community. As a group, their social existence was to be separated from that of the community as a whole. So we're about to bear witness to the struggles of the Negro earlier on, even before Reconstruction and then prior to the emancipation, because we need to understand how difficult it was in those trying times to actually get to the point of even being an owner of a bank. Support for creating a Black bank in the United States predates the Civil War by decades. For Black Americans living free in the era, a bank's core function, the combining of a community's resources or savings into a credit source for loans to individuals and businesses, could serve as a catalyst for economic development. Perhaps more important was the intangible benefit that such a high-profile development might have in the fight against slavery. Money begets influence, and influence respectability. Abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison told audiences in a series of 1831 speeches. Influence, wealth, and character will certainly destroy those prejudices which now separate you from society. The road to the first bank, however, was much longer than earlier supporters would have hoped. During the 18th and 19th centuries across the southern United States, these were the collateral for thousands of recorded mortgages. They served the security to fund the purchases of themselves or others, were mortgaged to finance the acquisitions of land or goods, and were exchanged to offset outstanding debts. All of this, of course, was generally done without the slave's knowledge and certainly without any say in the matter. For the United States, the years after gaining independence saw a nearly insatiable demand for credit among the former British colonies. Establishments, merchants, collectively the only group with the ability to provide a capital in the amounts sufficient for lending, were the first bankers. Many of these individuals or their predecessors had provided credit privately during the colonial era. Thus, while the eventual creation of banks might technically have involved the formation of new entities in terms of access to credit, these banks were simply a continuation of existing processes under improved conditions. As a result, it is not surprising that the borrowers they served were often members of the same limited group. Many Black Americans were unable to access financial services through these institutions. So, Black Americans would not legally be allowed to patronize the same banks as whites until the passage of the 14th Amendment in 1868. Thus, it is not surprising that the earliest substantive sources of credit for minority borrowers developed informally and very similarly to what occurred with European immigrants during the colonial era. Successful Black entrepreneurs in the North and also notable New Orleans in the South offered rudimentary financial services. These private lenders included some who had accesses to established banks through a white intermediary and or accommodating banker predate the Civil War by nearly 30 years in historical record, going back to 1833 if not earlier. While it appears all of these creditors provided were engaged in other businesses as their primary enterprise, most often as merchants. Some also did accept deposits and or in turn used the deposited funds as a source of credit for borrowers. Notably, some of the lenders also counted among their debtors white borrowers who preferred to keep their financial standings hiding from white bankers. So in addition to private lenders, another piece of the foundation minority banking can be found in the institutions that were most accessible to Black Americans in the segregated society. These were the ones established within the community. They include churches, schools, particularly fraternal orders, or so-called secret societies. That no Black banks were established before the Civil War is not surprising. While Black depositors with money in Wall Street banks may have received ample discussion during 1851 convention, getting those depositors to move their money out of the establishment institutions and into a new and untested bank was asking much. It could also probably go without saying that a bank was relatively low priority among the issues facing America's Black community. Much of the convention's discussions focused on abolition, education, property ownership, voting rights, and other issues. And here it goes. After emancipation, there would come questions of labor, wage, and political power, wrote legendary activist W.E.B. Du Bois. But now first must be demanded that ordinary human freedom and recognition of essential manhood, which slavery blasphemously denied. The number of individuals who were in position where they could lead any of the initiatives was exceptionally small. Even a brief review of the history from this period finds the names of the same individuals and organizations appearing in time and again, regardless of the topic. For example, during the same 1847 meeting where Van Rensselaer called for an exploratory committee on banking, one of the most substantial discussions was a debate on the idea of creating a national press. Van Rensselaer was also a key figure in the discussion along with Douglas and McCune Smith, who each had other businesses and activities. Now, the objective of this presentation is not to highlight the creation of the first banking system, which so happened to be the Freedmen's Bank, but to give the reader or listener an opportunity to understand just how difficult it was during trying times for a Black person to own a bank. Mind you, this is around the same time there's a power and a struggle over the middle class Blacks, right? You got Booker T and W.E.B. going toe-to-toe for the same sect of people, not so much worried about the other elitists or the lower class. Their focus primarily was the middle class. They felt like they could move Black people in the right direction, which if before President Obama was elected, that was pretty much their ground roots process, was to focus on the middle class Blacks. And then hopefully the lower class and the elite Blacks would join and create that momentum for him in his grassroots program. You see that a lot in politics. That's just one example. While it is certainly understandable that members of Congress would be eager to act in support of free slave population, the issue of nationally chartered financial institutions had already been a contentious one in U.S. history. Two previous banks that received congressional charters, the First Bank of the United States in 1791, the second in 1816, were unable to gain the public support, and neither lasted beyond their initial 20-year charter. Famously, the second bank became embroiled in the so-called Bank War, a political battle levied by President Andrew Jackson on his populist base that led to the institution's demise. After the expiration of the second bank's charter in 1836, bank chartering was left entirely to the province of the state governments until the 1860s. In the far southern states, the banks organized by Negroes prior to 1910 sprang up like mushrooms, but died almost as rapidly as they were organized. Their stability was intimately tied up in the laxity of supervision before the organization of banking departments by these states in 1910, and their problems grew out of the peculiarities of the Negroes' economic position in the South, in the far South. Nothing short of a study of an individual failures and a first-hand investigation of the economic life of the Negro in the States would have afforded an adequate treatment. Since such a study was impossible, it was thought best to exclude these banks from the report. In spite of the Negro's uncertain or unstable economic position, the market for property occupied by him or for property that is being transferred from white to Negro use may be exceptionally good during a rapid and extensive influx. But once the limits of the Negro population became fixed, it is difficult to find purchasers for property occupied by Negroes. Whites do not want to buy it, and Negroes can't afford it. In consequence, the white bank, which in prosperity is willing to lend to the Negro bank on real estate securities. And I want to kind of make a point here because really the Negro gets into banking based off their real estate. This will be a leverage play by white bankings and Congress to leverage against the Negro in case of any type of default. They will end up taking over the properties in the area. However, let me continue. So I'm gonna start over. Whites do not want to buy it, and Negroes can't afford it. In consequence, the white bank, which in prosperity is willing to lend to the Negro bank on real estate security, hesitates to do so in depression, except perhaps when the failure of the Negro institution endangers its own position. The white bank may already be carrying a large amount of paper on the Negro or the other property that the Negro bank, and although in proportion to its assets, the amount carried is not relatively as great as that carried by the Negro bank. The white bank refuses to tie up more of its funds in property that it thinks cannot be easily disposed of. Thus, the advantage which the Negro bank may have enjoyed during normal business or in a period of extensive migrations turn out to be purely temporary and speculative. The increased demand for the development of a Negro business was accompanied by an equally persistent demand for the organization of Negro banks. White banks, it was more and more alleged, would not supply Negro business, a Negro businessman with necessary capital or credit. In consequence, Negro leaders maintained that the organization by Negroes of their own banking facilities would meet this need. The degree to which white banks have been motivated in this attitude by racial instead of economic considerations is hard to determine. But from our investigation, we do know that the policy of many white banks is to discourage the deposits businesses of Negroes as the general rule. The adoption of this policy has been attributed by several white officials to two main causes. The first one is the probability of losing a large business of white clients who refuse to patronize public establishments frequented by black people in large numbers. The second is more important because it is high cost involved in handling deposits of Negroes whose monthly balances are a rule below the average and whose withdrawals are uneasily heavy and frequent. The second rule is a joke because they're trying to say that black people didn't have enough funds to actually institute helping them in the first place. So their little bitty deposits meant nothing to them. However, the second cause was hardly hold true with banks that have adopted the sliding scale charge on demand deposits recommended by the American Bankers Association. But peep this. So you mean to tell me that because you have 200 black people that's depositing $1 or $2 in the bank, withdrawing 50 cents, no matter the amount of transactions that these black people were having, you were getting a percentage of that anyway. So I don't understand that. That was a whole ploy, but they looked at them like that and frowned upon them and was just trying to, segregate the banks. So out of that, you get the Freedmen's Bank, which facilitates to all these black needs, but then you would have an issue with black people supporting the Freedmen's Bank if you just want to be truthful, and because of other reasons, and then you have some frivolous things that transpire within the Freedmen's Bank and many other black banks that will come to their demise. However, it has been noted that no fewer than 134 Negro banks have been organized since 1888. I'm going to say that again. It has been noted that no fewer than 134 Negro banks have been organized since 1888. This does not mean
that there were 134 banks in any given year. The number is for the whole period between 1888 to 1934. So between that entire stretch, there was 134 Negro banks. Solvent Savings Bank and Trust was founded in 1906 by Robert R. Church Sr. Before I go any further, we get to the period of 1906 when he establishes his bank. But prior to that, the struggles of getting black banking in play was hard pressed. So finally, we began to arrive at a moment where we start to see this appearance of black businesses and black banks sprout up. Now, his bank was located on Beale Street. Remember, he's got businesses up and down Beale Street. He's getting bank already. Now he got a bank on Beale Street, across from a church park and an auditorium. Original stock could be purchased for $10 a share. So you could purchase stock in the bank at $10 a share. So you know he was doing big business. All right. So by 1921, the bank boasted that it was the largest bank in the world, owned and operated by blacks with resources over $1 million. Church and his son, Robert R. Church Jr., served as successive presidents. Other early officers included Burt Rhoda as a cashier, as well as an undertaker, T.H. Hayes, J. Sanford, and attorney J.T. Settle. Directors included Reverend Thomas O. Fuller of Howard Institute and First Baptist Church, Lauderdale, Bishop N.C. Cleaves of CME Church, Dr. R.G. Martin, owner of Memphis Red Sox, and other leaders of the black community. When the neighboring Beale Street Baptist Church faced foreclosure, which we'll mention later, in 1908, Solvent paid the notes and saved the church. After the failure of several borrowers in the early 1920s, the bank merged with the Fraternal Savings Bank and Trust in 1927. But its position was peerless. Church Jr., who had resigned from active connection with the bank in 1912, deposited $50,000 to stem the panic. Excuse me. I want y'all to remember that. It is said that Robert R. Church Jr., who had resigned from active connection with the bank in 1912, deposited $50,000 to stem the panic. State bank examiners found a shortage of at least $500,000 in 1928, and Bank President Alfred Ward was jailed. Black reaction ranged from a shock to scorn. The failure of the Solvent Bank predated by a year the crash of 1929, which shocked the entire financial system of the United States. Here's the bank on Beale Street. Of course, they commemorated it, and this tells you right here, the Solvent Savings Bank and Trust Company, founded by Robert Church Sr., first Negro bank established in Memphis, opened at this site right here, as you can see, 392 Beale Street in 1906. This is a historical site. This is, of course, what you would see when you start doing all your savings and banking and stuff like that. You see stuff like it, like banknotes. Solvent Savings Bank and Trust Company. This was his capital stock at $25,000. As you can see, Mr. Church, Clay, Sanford, Mollison, Settle, and Church Jr. all on this news article. So here's a statement that we're going to take a look at. And this is talking about the Solvent Savings Bank and Trust and their resources over $295,000. This is from August 19th, 1918, and it's stamped, as you can see. This is to W.E.B. Du Bois. And it's extending an offer
and the following gentlemen to be presented at the cooperative conferences on August 26th through 27th. And then it targets the people and it got people names on here. So let's see what it says. It says, I think possibly these gentlemen are interested and would make the trip. We have about 50 subscribers for stock already paid on the Citizens Cooperative stores. We are organizing here, and I am having a prospectus printed preparatory to making a drive throughout the city. I think we will have the paid in capital of $5,000 within 90 days easily. With this capital, we hope to open our first store. The stores will operate under the laws of the state of Tennessee, and we have looked fully into the laws of governance in the state of Tennessee. How about using the article printed in the March crisis on theory of cooperation on the back of our prospectus by Mr. Bassi? Glad that you are getting along nicely and hoping that you will have a successful conference. I am very truly yours. And then he signs. Another news article. This is showing the Memphis Bank showing. This is their eighth semi-annual statement showing the conditions of the bank at the close of business December 31st, 1909. So this is the end of year statement. It says loans and discounts, $61,885.52. Furniture and fixtures, $4,500. Real estate, $750. Treasure stock, $14,333. Cash resources, $24,489. Total resources was $105,967.03. And this is in 1909. I think that could be like the equivalent to maybe almost $2 million or something like that. I don't know. 1.5 something. Anyway, liabilities, capital stock, $25,000. Undivided profits, $1,993. Dividends unpaid, $26. Certified cashier's checks, $1,193. Deposits was $77,754. So there was a difference here of about $20 from liabilities and total resources. They had more liabilities than resources. Now, there was a letter sent up to the United States Senate building, and this is a copy of that letter, which is a Senate hearing. They actually have these for a lot of banks that actually were shut down and a lot of businesses that were shut down. And the Congress, they print these in these little journal logs. However, I want to remember that Robert Jr. had deposited $50,000 in the bank before he had left. So peep this. This comes from February 6, 1929. Now, again, this is the United States Congress Senate Committee on Post Offices and Post Roads. This letter was written to the chairman of the Senate Committee in Washington, D.C. Excuse me, arguing that Mr. R.R. Church was responsible for the failure of Fraternal and Solvent Savings Bank and that the books of the institution did not show the deposits of $40,000 he supposedly had deposited to keep the bank afloat. Remember, he said he deposited 50. This letter is arguing that he did not deposit 40. We don't have evidence of a deposit from Church Jr. that would substantiate his deposit. So they argue in this, and basically they're saying it has been called to my attention that in the hearing over Memphis postmastership, the statement was made in the substance that R.R. Church was responsible largely for the failure. They're blaming him for the failure of the Fraternal Solvent Savings Bank and local colored institution. Says, I understand that it was stated that Church has secured from a Washington insurance company $40,000 to be deposited in the Fraternal Solvent Savings Bank, that the book institution did not show the deposits. The inference being that the money had not really gone to the bank at all. I am the local representative of the insurance company referred to, which is the National Benefit Life Insurance Company of Washington, D.C. The statement that the $40,000 referred to did not go to the bank is unqualifiably false. The $40,000 was placed in the bank to the credit of the National Benefit Life Insurance Company. The transaction having been handled through the Federal Reserve Bank, which placed it to the credit of Fidelity Bank and Trust Company for the credit of Fraternal Insolvent Bank and Trust. When the bank closed its doors, there appeared on the books on the bank $100,000 to the credit of the National Benefit Life Insurance Company, being that the amount of the previous amount of the deposit and the $40,000 of new deposits. There is nothing to justify any sort of claim as irregularity on Church's part in the transaction, even in the minds of his biggest enemy. If such enemy is animated by the slightest desire to adhere to the truth, representing as I do the life insurance company, I am fully advised of the complete status of the claim. So they're refuting these assertions that Church is responsible for the closure of the bank. Says I also represented in the trial, which had been in criminal courts on the case of, and then he names other people that he's represented in the case of Hayes, Yancey, Atkins, officers of the functional solvent bank who were tried on charge of having improperly used bank's funds. In the course of this trial, I went thoroughly into all the circumstances leading up to the bank's failure. Church was not an officer of either the Fraternal Bank or the Solvent Bank, which was merged, or of the merged institution, nor a director in any of them. I trust you will make this letter part of the Sheely hearing and justice to Church, who certainly is free from any taint or having caused directly or indirectly the failure of a bank. Yours truly, Chase M. Bryan. So there's the argument for Church, refuting the fact that he was responsible for the failure of the bank. And there you go again. Even though I read it to you already, I brightened it up so that you could see this on your screen. I know there's a little delay, but I did want to give people an opportunity who may be able to read to actually understand what they see. So I extracted it for you so you can visualize. This is Church's home. He built it in 1880. It has 14 bedrooms, double drawing rooms that are 32 by 16 feet, a mural decoration by a famed Italian artist. It was one of the first homes of the Queen Anne style erected in Memphis. It was a 3-story frame imposing building with 4 bay windows. It was a laboratory furnished. Unfortunately, his hires didn't keep up the taxes on the house, and it was seized by the city in 1930s. It was demolished during the construction of foot homes in 1941. The address of the home was 363 Lauderdale, changed to 384 South Lauderdale after renumbering. In 1953, the city of Memphis hosted a demonstration of fire equipment during which the home of Robert Church had built for his family in a wealthy mixed-race neighborhood was burned to the ground. The event was an act of revenge on the part of Memphis Mayor Edward Hull, boss Crump, for the Church family's black voter rights activism. The tri-state defender called the burning of Church's house an act of infamy. In 1955, the house and the surrounding neighborhoods were paved over by the city to make way for public housing complexes designated exclusively for African-American Negroes. So they burned down his house, cleared it out to build some projects. These are the projects that was near his home. And as you can see, it's a lot of projects. Church's businesses. Remember, he owned a saloon, bank, and other stuff. So here's one of them. This is in a hotel. The hotel is upstairs. So the saloon was downstairs. The hotel would be on top of this. The hotel was advertised as the only first-class colored hotel in the city. And this building is located on South 2nd and Gayosa Street. Here's a different image of it. And as I said earlier, you have the saloon and billiards downstairs, second floor hotel. So let's take a look at Church's contributions. So there's no appeal to Church for aid or public interest for the benefit of Memphis was ever made in vain. He was for Memphis, first, last, and always. After the 1878 yellow fever epidemic, Memphis had lost so much of its tax base that the city was reduced to giving up its charter. In 1898, Robert Church was first citizen to buy a bond number 1, for $1,000 to restore the city charter. He was a generous contributor to many other civic causes, including buying the city a patrol wagon during one yellow fever crisis. In 1901, when the United Confederate Veterans planned to hold their convention in Memphis, the city solicited funds to build a temporary $80,000 auditorium in the area of Confederate Park. Robert Church was one of the first to step forward and donate $1,000. Here's the church that his bank saved. I know y'all heard me talk about it, but this is the bank. This is the church right here. And it's still up to this day. So church, park, and auditorium. And I see my boy Malcolm in the chat. In 1899, Memphis didn't provide recreational facilities for Black citizens, nor were there suitable places where Black theatrical troops could perform. Robert Church bought a tract of land and created Church Park, which included a playground and a concert hall that hosted such prestigious guests as Booker T. Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, and W.C. Handy. This park auditorium was particularly important because it was a time when Blacks weren't even allowed in Memphis city parks or public auditoriums. His park was called Church's Park and Auditorium and was located on a site of over 6 acres on Beale and North 4th. He had a lot of stuff on Beale. The auditorium was equipped with the best and most modern equipment of the time. It could seat at least 2,200 people and had a cost of $50,000 to $80,000. This was the only venture of its kind in the United States, owned and operated by a person of color for members of his race. I'm going to say it again. This was one of a kind, state of the art. This was the only venture of its kind in the United States. W.C. Handy was employed as an orchestra leader of the auditorium. Years later, the city took over management of the park and auditorium, and during the 40s, in a racially motivated move, they renamed the auditorium to Beale Avenue Auditorium. After years of the neglect, some structures in the park were demolished, including the auditorium. Then the land sat empty and barren until 1987. When it was finally refurbished and re-landscaped in 1993, the park was listed in the National Registry of Historical Places and was made part of the Beale Street Historic District. In 1994, Roberta Church, the granddaughter of the founder, gave the park a large 22,000-pound white granite and bronze memorial monument, erected in memory of and dedicated to her grandfather, to Robert Jr. The monument features a bronze bust of Robert Sr. That's how it looked. You see what Malcolm said. We do Africa in April Day every year. It's Church Park Auditorium. That's an inside look, old black and white. So, yeah, I'm not going to read all of this, but this is the last will and testament of Robert Reed Church Sr. excuse me, in reviewing this, it was some interesting things about this, right? He says, I, Robert Church, the county of Shelby, state of Tennessee, realizing uncertainty of life and certainty of death, being sound mind and body and disposing memory, do make, publish, and declare this as my last will and testament, revoking all others by me heretofore made. I desire all of my just debts be paid first, including my funeral expenses. I give, bequeath, and devise to my wife and the church all of my personal property, whatever kind of character and whatsoever situated, except my watch and chain and diamond stud, which I hereby give and bequeath to my son, Church Jr. I hereby give and bequeath devise to my wife, Anna, absolutely forever, my farm entertaining about 138 acres of land on the near Riley Road in the 6th District of Tennessee. Said farming having been purchased by me from R.F. Cook and is known as part of the Northeast Spear Place. This property is left to my wife unconditionally and to do with it as she wishes. His next one, he gets lengthy. He begins to itemize things based on his kids, and other family members, and it gets discreet all through that. So I'm not going to give you all that. But he basically starts distributing out some properties on street corners and things of that nature for people to have. And he goes on and he continues to name property locations, certain things in there that may be significant value, but he's giving away businesses and buildings and commercial properties and things like that to certain people. Then he cleans up some of that stuff and he devises things for his son, Thomas A. Church, and his daughter, Mary Church Terrell, by a former marriage. And he wants them to share some stuff. So then he makes a list out of all the shared stuff that he wanted people to divvy up. But he gives away plenty of property. This dude was pretty much a real estate mogul in his time. And he continues to give away, naming property, naming sections, naming portions of things, saying stuff like also houses and lot known as 393, 395, 397, and 401 on the west side of Driver Street. The dude had property on every side of Memphis that he possibly that you could have, and he was naming this stuff and giving it out. He made sure that his descendants had some type of opportunities to create wealth for themselves. And he did a lot for his wife, and he continued to name things for her specifically, but he got a 6-page will dedicated to his family. Here are my sources, plus my sources are in the description, but if you want to check out his 6-page will, it is in, I do have it in here for you to extract from. As you can see, it's the very first source. It says Last Will and Testament of Robert Reed Church, the Journal of Negro History, Volume 65, number 2, associated from the Study of African American Life and History, Inc., 1980, pages 188 to 163. Boom. So, the significance of Mr. Church and his contributions to Black businesses, becoming the first millionaire, but also being one to have the first bank, was significant. And through his trials and tribulations, not really being accepted by his father, the Union, the Civil War breakout, him being stranded in Memphis, pretty much building up that uncertainty, but having the know-it-all to actually invest in himself and begin to create opportunities for himself that led or paved the way to to other things yield that type of reaction from him. And this is what we can learn from him. We can learn a lot. Like he dealt with a lot, but he in his endurance, but he provided a lot. He was a staple for Memphis. You got Malcolm in the chat here tell you he was a staple. Like I said, he's the first millionaire in Tennessee. Black man. He got to the money and he drew on his tree. Is it the only thing that I kind of disliked was the fact that they really tore the man's house down, which could have been a historical site and a landmark forever known to us. But they tore it down to build some projects. I'm not saying that those people really didn't need housing, but they could have built the projects behind his house. They could have sectioned it off, built the projects behind his house, and still did what they need to do. But as you can see, Robert Church Jr. He was good too. He's just as good as his father. He took up every aspect of his father's doings that he could, and he learned from it. Like the business was the business. Yeah, the business was the business. But man, I really learned a lot about it. But it showed, early on through my research, it showed me the significance of something that I think we all can learn from, like really appreciating not only supporting Black businesses, but being heavily invested in the growth of Black businesses. When you look at, like I left, like I said again, for those of you who have joined late, I left a PDF version, a downloadable free copy, PDF version of Let Us Put Our Money Together, the founding of America's first Black banks. I put that in the description for a reason, because there's lessons that we can learn from that. There's lessons that we can learn from Robert Church. There's lessons that we can learn from the Negro as a capitalist, because we really made a lot of mistakes on our own merit. We weren't entrenched as we should have been in trying to uplift businesses. Like Kofi Pie Research Team, right? We have Same Tree, Different Branch Publishing, right? That's a Black business. One that pretty much all of y'all that are tuned in are familiar with. This business of ours provides opportunities, but it also requires some sort of entrustment in us to be able to get jobs done for y'all, whether it be book covers, logos, business cards, editing books, articles, all of those things that we offer, or whether it's familyconnectedapparel.com, our merch and things of that nature. And not only that, but just our books. Like, Black businesses require investing in and support of. And without the investing in and the support of, and that's why we really don't do the donations thing. We try to provide quality information for our listening audiences and readers, and nice merch that would represent and support who you are and how you feel. We try to do that because we think that would be a staple for people to invest in, for one, and then support us or continue to support us, second. And that's why we try to provide the best quality information possible, sound methodology, and services, immaculate services. You purchase a book, you got your tracking number ASAP. We ain't waiting all weeks, months, days. No, your product on the way. And if there's an issue with something, then it's going to be a mailing issue, but we're going to rectify that. So our customer service aspect in that is an opportunity for you to see that we're really trying to earn your investment in our company and our business. And I think the story of Mr. Church is a fundamental catalyst of that, because he got people to believe in him, invest in him, and he brought in some of the biggest names in the game to help move Memphsonians further, and even his family further. He laid the foundation for generational wealth. If it was fumbled along the way throughout the generation that he left it, then it was on the people who he entrusted and left it to that would fumble the bag, because he did everything right by the people that he had in his way for them to secure the bag for many more years to come. However, after his demise, you would actually see some of these things transpire, like his house getting demolished because they didn't want to keep up the taxes. Come on, man. He left you everything that you needed in order to be successful. If you couldn't keep up with the taxes, sell the house. Sell the house, build a museum or something. I don't know. But don't let the state get it. They've been wanting it. They don't want to leave a legacy like that behind. And it's up to us to keep his legacy alive, not only for people in just Memphis, but everybody in every city across this country, especially Black people. Like, many Black people don't talk about him. You know what I mean? As successful as he was, many people don't even know his story. Saloons, billiards, banks, heavy in real estate. If he was doing all of that in today's society, the dude would be a billionaire. Like, I'm talking a real deal billionaire, because he probably would have owned about 60% of Memphis by now. The way property value has been devalued down there because of certain activities and things like that, he would own 60% of Memphis. That's crazy. But man, look, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Of course, we'll be back live. You know, I want to leave this within a digestible framework for people who may have missed it early and coming back and catching the replay, or people who may, you know, their first time watching it. They don't like long, drawn out things. And I know we only got people's attention span for so long. And with the whole TikTok and all of that stuff, they're reducing people's attention span. And I don't want to be a part of that. So hopefully we can get people back to elevating their attention spans and develop and grow from that. Feel free to continue to vote. I see that 97% of the people in the chat, or 97% of the people that actually voted, 27 of y'all, maybe 26 or 27 of y'all were here to learn. The other 2 or 3 people, they said they're not here to learn. So I feel bad for y'all, but you know, good luck in life if you ain't here to learn.
I don't want to be